Imagine if you married Jesus. Imagine, brother, if the wife you marry is Jesus. Imagine if your tithe is Jesus. And that's what that operation came to do. You know why? When man was created, what did God give him? He gave him his own image. That's why in Hebrews 1:3 it says the express image of his person. Because there is an image you carry during the corruption. That's where the anger, the lying tongue, and these many evil laws came from. So it is only the operation of the law of life that can chisel and modify it and bring you to the presence whereby you are transfigured. Then we now notice that you that was a fornicator, all of a sudden there is this piety you carried. The reason is simply because you have journeyed on a pathway of sons. Because sons, when they are done, they become the express image of his person. When you see them, you see the Lord. If you have seen me, you have seen him. That's what happens. The only thing God gave mankind when he said let us make man in our own image, it was his image. But there was something the fall did to us. When the fall came, it brought different kinds of lust. It brought different kinds of corruption in our heart. And so when you give your heart to Jesus, he will now put an operation inside of you. That's why he said in that day, you don't need to tell them about my law. I will write that law in their hearts. He said you don't need a teacher to teach them. He said that law will govern them. But how come? Despite the many churches, just in Old Port Harcourt alone, we can't count the numbers of churches. Yet in the bank, money is lost. Yet in the market, there is many dubiousness. Listen, although churches are growing big, the operation of the law of life has been darkened, has been killed. So his name can be Elijah. As powerful as that name sounds, he has refused to yield. So that corruption can't die. So you can even give him a position in church, a pastor, but you will notice that he can't exude the image of God, because there was no mortification that brought him to the presence of God to behold only God. Brothers and sisters, it's not only you that came with meekness. All of us were brought out of Egypt. But there are many people who are out of Egypt, but Egypt is not out of them. So what that law will do, that law will mortify Egypt. Sama, if only we can learn to yield to that, God will find sons. Because the only thing sons has to show is the image. He says he is the brightness. The reason why our Christianity these days is dry, you have been looking for God, you can't find him, is simply because there is one little government you failed to obey. If only you gave yourself to that government, that addiction would have died. Because what that government would have exposed you to is the presence. And what the presence will do to you is that it will bring the image of God to you. Then you will become the brightness of his glory, the express image of it. You will mirror God, because what you have been mirroring is the fall. This is what God, oh dear Holy Spirit of God, my brothers and sisters, this is what God is looking for. This is the heartbeat of God. I know you came with many needs, but I tell you nothing but the truth. When you become a son, you command your needs. There is an anger issue that you need to die to. There are many things you are mirroring, that we live a bipolar kind of life. People see you in the market and they can't even tell if you truly came to church. I know every Sunday you are dressed up, suited up, and you are in church, sitting in front and sitting behind, listening to great sermons from the man of God. But there is a bigger sermon that goes on in your heart every day. Is your conscience. It seeks to bring a government on you. If you will yield to it, then you will mirror God. When they see you, they have seen him. Because when he wanted to create man, he said, let us make man in our own image. That means if they see you, although your name is Ebuka, what they want to see is Jesus. Imagine if my wife is Jesus, there will be no problem at all. This is what actually the fullness of God is. He says the fullness of God now dwells in a bodily form. The fullness, it pleased the Father. In Colossians 1:19, that in him should all the fullness dwell. It pleased the Father. For the first time, a man can tabernacle and contain the fullness of God. I told you something, that what it means if you say giving God glory is your ability to contain God and manifest him. So he said it pleased the Father that in him the fullness should dwell. Then if you now read Colossians chapter 2 verse 9, it now tells you that the fullness of, in him the fullness of God dwells bodily. For the first time, all of the totality of God was captured in a human form. That's why Christianity is not a religion. Christianity is divinity at work in humanity. It is immortality that is expressed through mortality. Because it says, without controversy, this is the mystery of godliness. God was manifested in the flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. And he says all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In verse 14, he now tells you, the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. But there are many garbages we carried from the fall, and only the operation of the law of life can chisel it. So this night when you go home, because he has found out certain things that has to do with the fall in your heart, he will have to lead you personally. There are certain things you will not hear it, you will just know that for the next 30 days, this is what you should do. This is what God is calling. Is the making of sons. The church has produced babies. 80-year-old baby, 60-year-old baby, big in age, but not sons. There is an organic protocol we neglected for a long time, and that's why we are so powerless. The reason why we are powerless is this. It's not because there are not new programs. On Sunday we'll still have another program. They will target big names. Sometimes when you go for big meetings and you see the crowds, you are like, then in the market, who will you see? These are the same people that work in the bank. These are the same politicians that will preach to. What is happening? The reason is because it's simple. There is an operation they neglected. Although they came to church and heard a wonderful sermon, but there is a life. They can't mirror God. That is why after the service, the deacon that had the man of God powerfully can slap his wife. The man that after many things are going on, I beg you in the name of God, Ecclesia, listen to me online, on ground. God is calling us to become sons.